In high school, I female, 50 had a very close best friend, Kay. We weren't really part of the bigger friend group, although we did have mutual friends, but she and I were a gang of two, as close as sisters. I came from a difficult home situation, a little bit like foster care, but living with family members that were resentful for having to take me in instead of foster parents. This caused me to be wary of trusting people or getting close to anyone. Anyway, she moved to our rural town when we were in middle school, and we became incredibly close, closer than I've ever been with a friend in my life. She was the one who is known as the pretty girl, and I was known as the funny girl. I was the entertaining sidekick. She got all the boys, and I was a late bloomer, so I never had a serious boyfriend, but I never minded her being always in the limelight. I was proud when she was a cheerleader, homecoming queen, and prom royalty, and all those things because that was important to her, and I knew I was never going to fit that mold myself, so I never aspired to those things. Instead, I was the school play, newspaper, and school yearbook staff, and I worked 20 to 30 hours a week through high school to support myself, since I had almost no family financial support outside of a place to live. However, I didn't like the way she treated the guys she dated, because she was always cheating on them looking for the next, upgraded person to date. It was typical of her to have a steady boyfriend, and 2 or 3 others she was dating secretly on the side. Toward the end of our senior year, I had my first serious boyfriend, and I was pretty naive about life and relationships. He was older than me, from a different town, and came from a well-to-do family. His parents definitely looked down on me even though I tried, being young and foolish, to fit their ideal of what they thought they would want for their precious son. It wouldn't have mattered if I was perfect in every way to them. I was not in the same social class, so they would not accept me. When we graduated, Kay and I went to different colleges that were several hours from each other. Shortly after starting university, I found out that I was pregnant. At first, my boyfriend was excited and happy, and we would do things like go shopping for baby items together. However, his parents were very upset about the situation and gave him an ultimatum to break up with me or they would cut him off financially. For several months, he was conflicted, so instead of breaking up with me, he just started acting cruelly towards me, and the relationship became emotionally and physically abusive. It was during this time, when I was about 3 months pregnant, that I met someone from her college, just a friend in her friend group there that I began hanging out with when I visited her. B and I were instant friends, and he knew my relationship situation and advised me to leave, no matter what the repercussions were financially or in the eyes of society. I knew he was right, and because of my home situation growing up, I never wanted my child raised in a home where there was strife and abuse. So before I was even showing in the pregnancy, I ended the relationship, or more accurately, I accepted that his parents had already ended it. B and I became super close. Kay had mentioned in passing that if she wasn't in a serious relationship, she would date B. I replied back that if I wasn't in the situation I was in, I would also consider dating him. She didn't seem to like that comment because, at least in my opinion, I believe she thought he would never date me instead of her. But several months later, B and I sat up late talking and doing laundry at a laundromat, and he confessed that he thought he was falling in love with me. We both admitted that the timing and situation couldn't be much worse. I was 4 to 5 months pregnant, and I told him that I needed to focus on my child and not anyone or anything else except finishing my degree so that I could provide for my child. However, we both talked about the potential of our future being together someday. Some people on his campus even jumped to conclusions that we were together, and that he was the father of the baby, and he didn't even correct them because he didn't mind thinking about the what-ifs. As strange as that sounds. We both knew without doubts that we had found our person, regardless of the circumstances, and that one day we would find a way to be together. It makes me tear up still just writing this. I told Kay about the conversation, and she was a little bit sarcastic and flippant. I tried not to feel hurt, but her tone insinuated that he would never want to be with someone like me. Now for context, she was practically engaged at the time, and yet had at least 2 guys she was seeing behind her boyfriend's back. So I couldn't imagine that she had any real interest in B. Just a few weeks later, the next time I drove to that university for a visit, B asked if we could speak privately. He told me that Kay had come to visit him one night when friends had been over drinking. They all left, but she stayed. At that point, she threw herself at him, and she was pretty confident that he would reciprocate. He responded by telling her that he was in love with me, and even though we weren't together, he didn't think it was right for him to pursue anything with her. Of course, she was furious. So she commenced to tell him all the dirt about me that best friends know about each other. And when that didn't seem to sway him, she just started making stuff up to try to turn him against me. He told me enough, I didn't want the gory details. But I knew from what he relayed that there was no doubt she had completely betrayed my trust, because he wouldn't have known these things otherwise. However, we had already resolved not to keep anything at all from each other. So I set the record straight on the things that she had lied about, and the things that were true, we talked about openly. I thought if we ever are actually together, I want him to know everything about me, and I want to know everything about him so there are no secrets at all. I couldn't find her that evening, but the next day on campus, on the way to her dorm, I saw her walking out as was walking in. I just said, he told me everything. I was expecting some kind of wild denial, but instead she just glared at me, shrugged coldly, and walked away. I was in shock, and I never saw her face again, at least not for 30 years. B and I got married a year and a half later. He adopted my son, our son, and they have been so incredibly close that I don't think anyone would believe me if I told them that B wasn't his biological dad. Our son has always known the truth, and known that B was the dad that chose to be his dad, and I have the most enormous love and respect for this man still after more than 30 years of marriage. He is still my person, and I'm still his and a jealous ex-best friend who only wanted one more conquest and couldn't have it, wasn't able to break us up. In those early months, I still hated her so much for what she had done, or at least tried to do, that I sent her a wedding invitation with the time and location blacked out. Of course, I didn't actually want her to come to show her that she didn't stop us from being together. I included it in a box with things from her that I had accumulated through the years of our friendship. In the box was every printed picture I had with her ripped into confetti in a little bag and an article titled, "When Your Best Friend Betrays You," from some women's magazine, which I had cut out and scrawled along the top. "Thanks for the memories." I mailed her that box of wrath and married the love of my life. However, the story gets a little crazier from here. No one ever knew why Kay and I stopped being friends. I became a person of faith several years later and came to understand the power of forgiveness, that it didn't absolve the person for what they've done, but it would free me from my own torment. It took me a long time, probably about 10 years, to forgive her, and even longer to form trusting friendships with women again. A few years ago, my high school had a 30th class reunion. I've never been to any of them. Quite honestly, it just isn't my thing, and I wasn't really close to anyone in high school but her anyway. But a mutual friend told me that she wasn't going to be there, and encouraged me to come. I have lived quite far away on my hometown, actually spending most of my life in foreign countries for work, so I hadn't really kept up with most people. On a whim, I decided to go. To my relief, she wasn't there. However, a certain girl in our small class that had never been very nice to anyone that wasn't in her clique. I would love to think that she's changed, somehow had Kay's phone number. She FaceTimed her and shoved the iPhone in my hand. There we were face to face for the first time in 30 years. What is strange, and I'm not saying this boastfully, at least I don't think so, but she didn't recognize me at all because, according to other people, I've had a bit of a glow up throughout the years. When I told her who I was, I felt a little nervous, but I didn't feel anything else that I thought I would feel. No hate, no anger or hurt. She was just a stranger on the other side of a screen, someone that I didn't know and who didn't know me. But the look on her face of shock and the slightest flicker of horror when she realized it was me didn't really even give me any satisfaction, just vague sadness. We talked for a few minutes about where life had taken us. If I had any petty moment, it was a little satisfying telling her that I've been happily married to be all of these years. What I found so strange was a comment from someone who knew her. The person who had invited me said she had twisted the story to make it sound like she was no longer my friend because of something I had done to her in high school. After I heard the reason, I knew why she hated me enough to betray me, or how she had at least convinced herself that she was justified for what she did during our prom. The junior class hosts a dinner for the senior class before the dance. We all ate in our formal attire, which is really awkward because we were trying to stay neat and ready for prom photos. During the meal, a classmate toppled over a cup of coffee onto my pale pink dress and stained it before the meal was over. Now remember, I didn't really date in high school, and this is before I had a boyfriend, so I didn't have a date for the prom. I ran across the street to Kay's house because she lived so close to the school and we had been getting ready there. I didn't think anyone would be at her house, so I ran to get a towel and some detergent to see if there was any way to salvage my dress. However, her mother was there, and she had tears in her eyes. Her mom said, "I guess everyone knows now and that's why you've come back." I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, and she just shook her head and said, "Well, they'll find out soon." Tragically, one of our lifelong classmates in that small town had just been in a fatal car crash on the way to the banquet. It seemed everyone in the town knew except for the people at the school. I ran upstairs to the bathroom Kay, and I had been using to get ready. I was sobbing and in shock, because this was someone in our greater friend group that I had grown up with in this tiny little town since I was in diapers. I saw that Kay's out-of-town date, who wasn't a serious boyfriend but a guy that she saw from time to time, was already there waiting for her to get back from the banquet so they could go to the dance together. When he saw me crying, he walked up to me in the hallway and gave me a big hug. I barely knew this guy but had been around him a couple times in group settings. As I was crying and his arms were around me, the dude had the audacity to bend down and kiss me on the mouth, and then say that he wished he was going to prom with me instead of Kay. I don't actually remember if I said anything. I don't think I did, because I was so in shock that moments after I find out that a friend is gone forever, this guy, who I thought was being a friend to me and consoling me, was trying to hit on me. I basically told him something along the lines that he needed to stop how he was acting. I left immediately and waited in the school foyer until the other students had been notified, because I couldn't face everyone since I was the only student who knew about the accident, especially since the sister of the boy who had passed away was in the school and didn't know. Evidently, what I found out all these years later is that Kay's mother was standing at the bottom of the stairs at her house and saw this guy kiss me, and possibly heard what he said, though I don't know that part for sure, and told her daughter. Kay never said a word to me, so she never gave me a chance to tell her my side or to explain that it was completely unsolicited and unreciprocated, although it might have looked differently because I was in utter shock in a moment of grief, which this guy took advantage of. So I would say what a waste that this culminated into her betrayal and 30 years of not having had Kay in my life. Honestly, though, I'm not sure we would have been friends much longer anyway, because our lives were on such different paths and are such wildly different people. I can just hope that this is a cautionary tale about jumping to conclusions and letting resentment fester, whether it is or isn't warranted. To this day, I have no idea if she knows the truth. Although I've used fake names and vague situations for privacy, a little part of me does hope that she finds this, realizes it's me, and knows that I didn't really betray her and that I forgive her for trying to split me and be up. I've had my happily ever after. B and I are still living it, and I hope she has found hers too. Everyone needs a little grace in this life after all. Things I've learned: 1, real love exists. 2, no true friend would harbor such bitterness and not give their friend a chance to clear up a misunderstanding. 3, just because someone seems to have everything doesn't mean they aren't jealous of you. These are the kind of people that will only befriend you if you stand in their shadow and accept the role of less than to keep them feeling superior. 4, someone else's spite is not worth your peace.